collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
Coming up on this week's programme, Cyprus gets a rap over the knuckles from the European Court of Human Rights.
According to the court, it was found that the detainees did not have enough individual space because of the overcrowding of the Menoia Detention Center, and therefore the CPT standards were not complied with by the Cyprus government.
And Zero Food Waste Cyprus is putting out a call for volunteers.
We gather there at around 2:33, and then we collect the food and we separate the good from the bad. And at 4:30, we transfer to the Anglican Church, and the beneficiaries know that the distribution starts at 5.
We'll also take a look at some of the stories making the headlines this week. At the end of June, the European Court of Human Rights issued a ruling which has quite a big impact on how we do things here in Cyprus with regard to asylum seekers and migrants. Joining us to discuss what exactly the court said is human rights lawyer and a member of the steering committee of KISA. That's the NGO that stands for Action for Equality, Support and Anti-Racism. So, Nicoletta, it's a moment that we should be perhaps taking stock, shall we say, of how we do things here in Cyprus. What did the court actually say? Because it was pretty damning, I think.
Yes, exactly. First, it's important to say that this case, it's an old case. It's a case going back to 2013. And the European Court of Human Rights found that the conditions of detention in Menoia Center, which at the time it was a newly established detention center, violated the convention which prohibited torture and human degrading treatment on the basis of the fact that, according to the court, it was found that the detainees did not have enough individual space, because of the overcrowding of the Menoia Detention Center, and therefore the CPT standards were not complied with by the Cyprus government. And this is important because this was at the time when Menoia was already a newly established center. Now we are in 2021, and we know that the Menoia Center is most of the time overcrowded, so most probably we have a continuous situation of violation of 103. And in addition, the court found out in relation to the applicant and the complainant in the case that his right to personal freedom was violated on account of the fact that he was released by the court in a habeas application, but he was rearrested immediately after and continued his detention for quite a few months before his deportation to Egypt. Therefore, the court found that there was a violation of his personal freedom because nobody complied with the court decision of the Cyprus court to release him.
It does say that the Civil Registry and Migration Department, or indeed their director, that decided contrary to the Supreme Court's judgment that the applicant's continued detention was lawful, they ordered the issuance of new orders. Now, were those new orders carried out?
Yes, exactly. They issued new orders, even though the previous orders were not cancelled, because the Supreme Court decided that the length of his detention was illegal. And it is as if the court didn't say that this person should be released. But this is a practice that was followed at the time quite often by the director of the Civil Registry and Migration Department, because it's not the first case we have with this fact. We had the previous case where the court condemned Cyprus again in the Hagilo case for the same reason, that there was no compliance with Supreme Court decisions in relation to the personal freedom of migrants.
This is known, I think, as arbitrary detention, is that right?
Yes, exactly. And when you have a Supreme Court ordering the release of a person, and you have the administration on the same grounds, not even on different grounds, on the same grounds issuing a new detention and deportation order, that's obviously an arbitrary detention, and it violates your right to personal much freedom.
Now, they also said, I think, at the European Court of Human Rights that there was no effective remedy mechanism for a person to challenge detention conditions when Article 3 was violated.
This is also an important finding. I think it's the second case that the court decides that. The first one was in Hadino's case. The second one is the Monilotsi case. Because one of the arguments of the government was that the complaints under Article 3 relating to the conditions of detention should be considered to be inadmissible for non-exertion of domestic remedies at the national level. And the court found that the applicant did not have effective domestic remedies because, in fact, and this is a fact, we don't have any domestic remedy capable of changing the conditions of detention of a person complaining about these conditions. We may have a lawsuit, you can file a lawsuit for compensation in case the conditions of detention are found to be contrary to Article 3, but the compensation is only a monetary compensation. It does not have the effect of actually obliging the authorities to change the detention conditions.
Does that mean we need to change our laws here, Nicoletta?
Yes. I mean, an example is whether it's effective or not. It should be still examined by the European Court. An example is the prison authorities, where because of condemnation by the European Court of Human Rights that prisoners did not have any access to effective remedy in relation to prison conditions, they established the prisons board with the competence to examine complaints and with the competence to make suggestions. But even that it cannot be considered to be effective in my view, because it only suggests changes in relation to detention conditions, and there is not a decisive power of this board to change the conditions of detention.
So everything can carry on as normal?
Yes. But this, in fact, in relation to detention of migrants, we have to make this distinction. Migrants under detention for the purpose of deportation are regulated by different set of rules. The prison rules do not apply in these cases. There is a separate set of regulations regulating detention for the purpose of deportation, and there is no such a remedy. Not even a detention board that could eventually decide that conditions of detention are violated Article 3. Another problem we have is that even though we have the Commissioner on Human Rights, the Ombudsman and Commissioner of Human Rights, which is supposed to be the body monitoring conditions of detention and violations of the prohibition of torture and inhuman and degrading treatment under the UN Convention on Torture, and therefore it's supposed to monitor conditions of detention. Unfortunately, this is not done.
You did say that detention prior to deportation. So how long are they keeping people in detention before deporting them?
This is another serious matter. In the case of this applicant, he was detained for a period of approximately 7 months. Very often, people are detained for longer than, under the law, for purpose of deportation, the maximum measure rule is 6 months, but it can be, they can decide to extend detention for a period of another 12 months if there are difficulties in deportation. So the maximum under the law is 18 months. That's for people in detention for the purpose of deportation.
Now, I'm not clear. Sorry, Nicoletta, this isn't very clear to me. If somebody has been told that they are going to be deported, then surely you take them to the airport, you put them on a plane, and they're deported. What's this 18 possible months of hanging around?
Okay, it's not as simple as that, and I will explain why. First of all, the most important principle in deportation cases is that detention is always the last resort. So, if you want to deport a person, you don't necessarily decide the detention of that person at the same time. There are other alternative means that you can secure that this person will appear on the day of the deportation to the airport in order to be deported. For example, putting a money guarantee see or appearing at the police station even every day to sign so that when the authorities are ready to deport, they can just, as you said, take them to the airport and deport them. So you don't have long detention periods. These provisions are not applied in Cyprus. They issue detention orders for the purpose of deportation immediately with a deportation order, as a result of which people may have to stay in detention for long periods of time for various reasons. Sometimes they don't have a passport. Sometimes they don't agree to their deportation, so they may submit other type of applications, such as asylum applications, or they may have issues that need to be examined. Sometimes they are members of the family of Cypriots or members of the family of EU nationals, and this detention may take a long time until it's clarified whether these people can be actually deported first, and if they can be actually deported, whether they have the necessary tools to deport them, such as a passport or, in COVID period, many migrants were detained just because there were no flights available, but they continue to detain them.
I think a lot of people listening might also say, so I'll be devil's advocate here, that if you don't detain them and they know they're going to be deported and they don't want to be deported, of course, then they can go underground.
Of course, this is a risk you always have for people to go underground and violate their terms and conditions of presenting to the police station in order to be deported when the time comes. But they never tried this in order to have this argument. They never tried whether this could be an alternative measure that could secure deportation at the right time. They only tried detention. And obviously when people are detained for such a long period of time, and eventually they may be released because they cannot detain them any longer because the maximum period is passed, they are going to go underground anyway because they don't want to pass through the same procedure again. So, yes, it is a problem, but let's also take into account that Cyprus is a very small island. We are not in the EU where you don't have border controls and people can abscond or go to another member state and disappear forever. We are a very small island, so even if people go underground, eventually they are going to be arrested for one reason or the other, and this is the experience we have, that people may be arrested for other reasons, for traffic accidents or traffic controls or whatever, and they are found that they are irregular, and then they are detained to be deported.
What about those who cross over into the north?
Well, it's a big issue in my view, because the Republic of Cyprus, and this is something that we should always have in mind, because it seems the government forgets about this. The Republic of Cyprus is the whole territory of Cyprus. We, the government, has consciously limited the application of many of our legislation, such as the aliens and immigration, some parts of it, and refugee law, for example. They limited their application only to the government control area. In my view, this is wrong, because you deny the official government of the Republic of Cyprus, which is recognized internationally, decided to limit its sovereignty and the application of its legislation only to the government control areas. So, a person leaving the government control areas and going to the TRNC has nothing to do with the Republic of Cyprus any longer.
But on the other hand, Nicoletta, the government, whatever law it passes, it will be ignored in the north.
Yes, but it will be ignored because the north consider that they have their own state. Okay, so the authorities in the north, they consider that they have their own state, even though it's not recognized, but they have their own laws. But it's irrelevant what the authorities in the north are doing. What is important is the official position of the recognized government of the Republic of Cyprus, because if you deny your sovereignty over the whole territory of your country, and you say, I don't care what happens in the north, and I limit the application of my legislation only to the government control area, already, and this is something I have been saying for many years, already it's like you're partitioning your country the legal, in the legal sense. You see what I mean? For me, this is something very, very serious, because it's a different thing to say that my laws apply in the whole territory of the Republic of Cyprus, because I'm the official state, the recognized state, but I cannot exercise effective control in the non-government control areas. So there is nothing I can do if they go to the north. And it's a different thing to say that my laws, my limits, my laws apply only up to the green line.
Oh, it's also very complicated. If we could only just solve the Cyprus problem, there wouldn't be half of these problems, would there?
Exactly.
We'll have to defer for another time, because we're out of time, the question of people who are stuck in the buffer zone and being denied the ability to even apply for asylum. But I think we'll have to do that another time, Nicoletta. Thank you for unravelling, or trying to unravel, some of these extraordinary situations that we have here. But are we likely finally to take any notice at all of the ruling of the European Court of Human Rights?
Well, the experience we have is that it takes many years for the government to comply with the European Court of Human Rights decisions. I can give you an example. The case of MA versus Cyprus, where the court decided that we don't have an effective remedy in relation to deportation of asylum seekers and migrants. And the decision was taken in 2013. We still haven't fully complied with that decision.
Is there any penalty if we don't comply?
Well, there is a procedure after each decision of the European Court of Human Rights. There is a procedure at the Committee of Ministers, which is a political instrument, if you want, which has the competence to monitor compliance with the decisions of the court. And this is a process. It's a process, and it's more a political process in the sense that it's a ministerial committee from all the member states of the Council of Europe, and they try to see how the state complies with its obligation arising from the decision of the court. But it takes time because it's a political process. The maximum penalty you can get is for this, the committee, and eventually the instrument of the Council of Europe, to say that if you don't comply with court decisions, it means that you don't abide by your obligations. It means that you cannot be a member of the Council of Europe, and then you have to be expelled. But that's the most serious penalty you can have.
So basically it doesn't really matter what the courts say, because if you want to ignore them, then you go ahead and ignore them. Nicoletta Haralambidu, human rights lawyer and a member of the steering committee of KISA, trying there to unravel all the facts when it comes to the fact that the European Court of Human Rights recently said that Cyprus, through its Manoia detention centre, is violating Article 3 and Article 5 of the Convention on Human Rights.
This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambis.
There are plenty of opportunities to volunteer in Cyprus in all different aspects of our life. One of them that's been very successful for the last several years is Zero Food Waste Cyprus. It's growing, and they're looking for more volunteers. Joining us to tell us all about it is Dimitra Theodotou. Dimitra, first of all, how many volunteers do you actually have, and are they all over Cyprus or only in particular areas?
We have a lot of volunteers that come not on stable basis, so most of them are from Nicosia, but lots of them come from Limassol, and we have also some volunteers that are from abroad, so Germany, Turkey, we have France. This is for the Saturday after market event that it's happening in Nicosia. For our event that it's happening in Kerin every Wednesday, they are mostly from Turkey, and they are about 15 people there now.
So basically this is a Nicosia, one in the south, and Kyrenia in the north. What about the other areas, for example Paphos, Limassol, Larnaca and so on?
The idea is to expand in all cities, and that's why we are making this open call for volunteers, because we want to see our initiative growing. So for now, we don't have any operations there, but the plan is to expand.
So particularly, I presume you need a coordinator in those areas, because they do all have markets, don't they?
Yes, of course, yes. Especially for Paphos, which is far away from us, we'll definitely need a coordinator, and we are already in discussions with one person who is interested to do this. So it's going to happen soon.
Right, you're looking for people who are willing to give up, a couple of hours on a Saturday lunchtime afternoon to go round the markets, talk to the people who haven't sold everything, and they're very generous, I know, at the Nicosia market, giving you the leftovers, but then you've got to coordinate handing those out to needy people. So where do you think you might do that in the other towns?
In the other towns, it's going to be probably somewhere close to the market. But for now, the call for our volunteers is also for the Nicosia aftermarket. You correctly explain a bit what's happening. We are going to the market every Saturday, and we are collecting the food from the vendors. And then we are distributing this food to people in need, and we go to the Anglican Church. And for this period, the period after COVID, and it's summertime, less people are coming, so we will need some support in this coming months in Nicosia market as well.
Okay, because it's holiday time, isn't it? I think everybody who relies on volunteers suffers a little bit in July and August. Not only is it very hot, but people do, quite understandably, go off somewhere for a week or 2 weeks, and then the numbers drop. So how many can you manage with, if you have to, in, for example, Nicosia? Because that's where it's most successful, I think.
Mm-hmm. Even 4 people are enough. Of course, if it's more, it's less work. So it's important to have at least 4 people and at least 3 cars, so that we can transfer the food. We do have our stable volunteers, and usually the car issue is handled. But yeah, the minimum we can do with is 4 volunteers per week.
So if somebody's listening and thinks, I can manage a couple of hours on a Saturday, tell us again about the timing, because the market is open until what time?
The market is open until, I think, around 3:30. We gather there at around 2:33, and then we collect the food and we separate the good from the bad. And at 4:30, we transfer to the Anglican Church, St. Paul Anglican Church, which is very close to the market, actually. And we transfer there, and the people, our beneficiaries, know that the distribution starts at 5.
And then by 6 o'clock you're finished?
Yeah, by 6 o'clock everything is finished, usually.
So it's not a great deal of somebody's time. What should someone do if they'd like to help out?
They should just complete our volunteering form. It's very easy. It's in our bio, in all our social media, or they can even just send us a message, and we will get back to them.
So they look for Zero Food Waste Cyprus on Facebook, for example?
On Facebook and on Instagram, yeah. And we have our website there where we have our volunteering form.
Okay, well, the best of luck in manning all the things you have to do over the summer period. Dimitra Theododou from Zero Food Waste Cyprus, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Rosie.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
In other news this week, well, the pandemic. It doesn't go away, does it? We had a surge in cases, but at the same time, we're having a problem persuading younger people to get vaccinated. One of the measures the government has introduced is the requirement for a safe pass if you want to go to restaurants or theatres or generally mingle with other people. Now that means you have to present either a vaccination certificate or a negative test, or you must have had the coronavirus within the last 6 months and recovered. Now the problem is, who checks that you've got your safe pass when you go out and about? Well, the owners of venues that are being required to do this are up in arms. They say it's not their job. The government, if it wants people checked, should provide the people to do the checking, and they're threatening strong measures if something doesn't change, and quickly. They say it's causing problems in the workplace. Staff don't want to ask customers to check whether or not they're allowed to be there, and then who chucks them out if they're found not to have the safe pass? In the meantime, we've had businesses and individuals fined for going out without the safe pass. The other story featuring prominently both in the printed media and on the TV and radio is the upcoming visit of Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan to the occupied areas of Cyprus. He's due in the north on July the 20th, and he is expected to make an announcement about Varosha. Now, for those of you who don't know, Varosha is the fenced-off area, currently a military area, in Famagusta. And there are fears that he may announce a change of its status to make it a civilian area, which would mean that people could settle there. The big question for Greek Cypriots with property in Famagusta and indeed in Varosha is whether or not they should apply to the IPC, that's the Property Commission in the north, for the loss of use of their property, in other words, staking a claim to the fact that it is their property. Now, the other problem is, do they move back if they get their property back? So it's a very complicated issue, but President Anastasiadis was very clear earlier this week that every effort should be made to prevent any fait accompli by Turkey, and he's asking the UN and the EU to act on the issue of Varosha. But for those who have followed this story since the Turkish invasion of 1974, a lot of people are also saying that what has the government done to try and settle the problem itself? Why should we rely on others when we don't apparently have the will ourselves? It's a conundrum, and it's one that is very much a talking point at the moment here in Cyprus. There's news too that in the wake of those dreadful wildfires a couple of weeks ago, that the government is planning to lease some firefighting aircraft to see us through to the end of the fire season. But it hasn't gone unremarked that it was a few years ago the government said it was going to buy firefighting aircraft, and then that decision was somehow just shelved. The Environment Minister Kostas Kadis said earlier this week that the government is considering buying a firefighting air tractor, and in the meantime the fire service has said that more people are needed on the ground, especially in the forested mountain areas, which are very difficult sometimes to reach. Meanwhile, Cyprus has once again put in an application for the establishment of an EU firefighting aircraft base on the island within the framework of the EU RescEU programme. But let's finish on a rather happier note, because it's summer screenings in the garden at the Goethe Institute in the buffer zone in Nicosia. Starting tonight, they have their summer cinema, as they call it, and they'll be presenting a programme of short films and feature films, a tribute to the actress, screenwriter and director Maria Schrader. She, of course, is one of the best-known women in German films. Now, if you want more information or to make reservations, you can call 22 674 606. All the details are on the Goethe website. That's www.goethe.de/Cyprus. And it is worth pointing out, if you're not a German speaker, that those films that are in German will have English subtitles, and some of the films are in English and they will have German subtitles. That number once again, 22 674 606. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.